Welcome to the IMF Bentham podcast. My name is Justin McClernand and I'm your host for today's podcast called The CFO Perspective on Dispute Finance. I'm an investment manager in IMF Bentham's Perth office, responsible for sourcing, evaluating and presenting cases to our Australian Investment Committee and managing cases for which funding has been approved. In today's episode, I'll be interviewing Stuart Mitchell, the Sydney-based Chief Financial Officer of IMF Bentham's global operations. Prior to joining IMF Bentham, Stuart was CFO, Legal Counsel and Company Secretary for Ironbridge Capital, an Australian-based investment and private equity firm which provides funding for domestic and international businesses. He'll tell us a little bit more about his background shortly. I'll be talking with Stuart today about the challenges facing CFOs and about third-party dispute finance. What is it? And how is it being used, and what a CFO should know about dispute finance and how it is assisting corporates. I hope you take away from this podcast a better understanding of third-party dispute finance, how businesses are using this funding model to outsource all of the costs and risks of their commercial disputes and pursue their legal claims while reserving capital for business as usual and growth. So good afternoon, Stuart. Perhaps if we can kick things off with you telling us about your role as IMF Bentham's CFO and provide a little background on your career in finance and law.
Hi, thanks, Justin. I'm the recently appointed CFO at IMF, and I've direct control and accountability for the planning, implementation, managing and running of the financial activities of the IMF Group. After obtaining a professional accreditation and working as both a chartered accountant and as a solicitor in New South Wales, I've amassed over 20 years of experience in the financial services sector in Australia and the UK. As Justin said, most recently prior to joining IMF, I was the CFO at a large Australasian-focused private equity fund. And with its expanding geographical and product offering of IMF in conjunction with an aim to have funds under management exceeding $1.5 billion by the end of FY19, IMF was an attractive opportunity for me to pursue. I'm glad to be on board.
Terrific, Stuart. So you've only recently joined IMF. What can you tell us about IMF Bentham and what was it about the company and I suppose the dispute finance industry in general that attracted you and persuaded you to leave your job and join IMF?
Well, obviously IMF is a publicly listed company with headquarters in Australia. It operates out of 14 offices across 6 countries with a high success rate of 90% plus from over 150 completed cases. Those figures and print speak for themselves, I think. Is it a pioneer in the industry with a strong reputation for integrity and transparency? And I've always been an admirer of IMF from afar, as it has done a number of class actions in Australia with the apparent consequence of their protection for individuals' rights. As I've always been involved in accounting and finance from funds management, I had an intellectual interest in the legal field that I did not transfer into a career interest for any great length of time, and it is now coincidentally fortuitous for me to bring the funds management perspective to an asset class I have an empathy for. Additionally, I was attracted to the disruptive and embryonic nature of the sector and the underpinning concept of litigation financing's ability to provide access to justice.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's put the spotlight perhaps on the role of today's CFOs. And I think that having occupied 2 of the critical positions in a company, Stuart, CFO and legal counsel, you're actually quite uniquely placed to offer us some insight into the machinations of corporate management through both the legal and financial lenses. What do you see as some of the priorities and challenges that today's CFOs face?
Justin, I think the priorities and challenges are varied and complex. The CFO remains responsible for all the financial aspects of a business and should aim to provide advice to the CFO, management and the board. In recent times, I think the increasing regulatory and compliance demands have fallen to the CFO, and these, along with challenges of risk and capital management, customer and stakeholder satisfaction in the face of industry disruption and ongoing budgetary constraints, have made the CFO a vital cog in that management complex. These challenges only continue to increase whilst the financial imperatives have not disappeared, and I think a CFO needs an ability to be agile and find solutions to any of those scenarios as they develop.
It certainly sounds like CFOs have a lot of plates spinning in the air. What do you think has changed for the modern CFO?
As I just mentioned, I think the increased regulation and disruptions are the first things that spring to mind. whilst the search for value for money and the constant pressure to do more with less has been particularly prevalent since the GFC, I believe that both of those items will remain with us.
Are you aware of any differences as between industries and the types and sizes of different organisations, or do you tend to think that the challenges for CFOs are likely to be the same irrespective of their industry or organisation?
I think in general the challenges are the same. However, there are obviously regulatory or jurisdictional or technology factors that are particular to any industry. Environmental issues obviously spring to mind as something that's going to come up more and more. But in general, I think the CFO has to have that ability to find the financial solution whilst being aware of the stakeholders' issues throughout those dynamics.
Understood. So let's take a look now at how a CFO might conceptually prioritise risk management, capital management and budget restraint. Stuart, where do these things sit on the list for today's CFOs?
I like your term earlier about things in the air. At any particular point in time, they're at forefront, so they don't disappear. I think it would be easy to say that the capital management and therefore the resource allocation as a general concept overrides all of them and permeates any particular element to it. The CFO, sits there with that financial imperative and the ability to recognise customer, stakeholder and other imperatives fits within that gambit.
And so what strategies are CFOs employing to address these imperatives and meet the challenges?
I think that CFOs need to be solution-driven and agile in what they do. I think there is it goes in waves, but an ongoing concept to outsource or find best of breed to assist where possible. I think that CFOs can't do everything. I don't think general counsels can do anything. So an ability to find the right thing to leverage off is an important strategy to be able to implement.
Well, I think that provides a great segue into what IMF's business, third-party dispute finance, is all about. So for those of you who may not be familiar with this form of finance, in brief, third-party dispute finance is the funding of commercial litigation, insolvency litigation, and also includes arbitration by someone who's not a party to the claim in return for receiving a share of any judgment, settlement, or award. The third party typically assumes all of the costs, and these include solicitor and barrister fees, expert fees, and other disbursements. And they also assume all of the risk that the claim is unsuccessful, and that includes adverse costs and security for costs in loser pays jurisdictions. And this is commonly used in commercial disputes, insolvency claims that are brought by liquidators, receivers and administrators, and of course also in multi-party actions. Now, if the dispute is resolved successfully, and that may be by way of a settlement or judgment, or in the case of arbitration, an arbitral award, then the funder is reimbursed its direct outlays plus a share of the amount recovered. So the finance is non-recourse, which means that if the claim fails, it's the funder, not the claimant, who bears all of the costs, including, of course, any adverse costs. So how is third-party finance being used today, and how is it different from how it's been used in the past? Well, today, third-party dispute finance has been embraced by many jurisdictions in the UK, in the EU, North America and Latin America, Asia and the Middle East, with the legal and regulatory frameworks in those jurisdictions adapting to dispute finance to allow it to proceed. Product offerings have also evolved to become much more bespoke and to cater to a wider range of claimant needs. And these include things like working capital funding, seed funding to get a claim underway and to carry out investigations to assess whether there is, in fact, a meritorious claim, as well as more recently claim portfolio funding. And this natural evolution has led to the introduction of corporate finance and risk management solutions for solvent companies. And this is an alternative means of financing the pursuit of their valuable commercial claims, which is enabling these well-resourced claimants to use third-party dispute finance really as a tool to manage their costs and risks. So I think third-party dispute finance is certainly becoming a mainstream financial product and service, and it's rapidly moving towards general acceptance in the business community. So Stuart, can I ask your views on who's using third-party dispute finance today? Is there a typical size or a type of company, or are there particular industries? And are there key jurisdictions where we're seeing the real market or the largest market for dispute finance?
Look, I think it's fair to say that to a large extent it's still a new asset class and it's a fast-growing market. The key jurisdictions include the Asia Pacific, USA, Canada and Europe. It's available in Africa and South America as well. There are nuances in each of the different jurisdictions, but it's becoming global. It's available to corporates, small to large multinationals. And I think that as it becomes more mainstream and more aware, it will spread further. As far as industries go, anything, consumer goods, energy, financial services, technology and telecommunications. I think it's going to become vital to the way law firms operate. And in the US and Canada business, we provide financing to law firms in respect of their portfolio of cases.
Okay, so what do you see as the key points then that a CFO should know or needs to know about third-party dispute finance?
At this stage, I think it's a case of getting the message out to the CFOs in general that this is an available product and service.
Look, I think that may sound obvious, but one of my responsibilities as an investment manager is to go out there and meet with the corporates and tell them about IMF Bentham's dispute finance product offerings and make them aware that, funding for solvent corporates is something that we do offer, and explain how it can provide a commercially effective alternative to, the more traditional approaches of managing commercial disputes. But I find absolutely that it's not something that many organisations I speak with seem to know much about. What can you tell us about what a CFO should know about it so that's communicated through to the other echelons in the organisation?
Yeah, I think you're spot on in that summary. The third-party financing removes litigation from an expense line and shifts the litigation onto the balance sheet as an asset with potential recovery. The financing available is non-recourse, so that the entity using this approach effectively for no cost or associated impact can protect the claims that it feels that it has. Also, without a distraction of resource and still receive compensation around those areas. I think as an asset reallocation solution, it's a bit of a no-brainer. And I think that should resonate strongly with CFOs. With IMF Bentham, on top of that, you also receive the skills of people like you and the other litigants around the organisation. I think it's a great value add to finance and any legal area to have that experienced, dispassionate third-party advisor to assist with any potential litigation claim. It's not business as usual for most organisations to be considering these things, and therefore can be very disruptive and a major resource sinkhole. I think non-recourse financing and IMF skills absolutely flip that on their head and make it a very positive-looking asset.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, it certainly seems to make a lot of sense. What are some of the ways in which you think third-party dispute finance then can assist a CFO?
Look, without it being a resource drain, I think it allows the CFO to align with the stakeholders to pursue revenue and better bottom line results. It's imperative to be able to protect your rightful claims as any organisation, to protect your intellectual property and your contractual rights, and to communicate to competitors or others that your company is not a pushover. So just as an ability to protect your hard-earned worth is valuable. Budgets are challenging in many industries, and yet these are pseudo-assets that are sitting around with potential claims and real significant revenue hiding within many companies. Through non-recourse financing and no actual cost outlay, these can be accessed. I think many companies have dormant meritorious claims. There's an example of DuPont, which recovered $2.7 billion US between 2003 and 2014 from identifying and pursuing claims that might otherwise have sat there or been wasted. I think that's a large number that many organisations won't necessarily have that same number, but have the same hurdle to overcome in pursuing them. And IMF and third-party funding overcomes that.
Yeah, look, so we speak to both CFOs and legal counsel about IMF Bentham's dispute finance for corporates, and I've certainly noticed that the message strongly resonates with CFOs. But do you think that third-party dispute finance is or should be the sole domain of the CFO, or should it be the sole domain of legal or general counsel, or do you think it's something really that both really need to be alive to?
Look, I think it's both, but it will depend on every organisation. In many companies, the CFO has the umbrella responsibility for legal as well. I think if they are separated, there should be a close alignment between the two. As an asset class, as an option for corporates, and it becomes more mainstream and its acceptance becomes more prevalent, I think there's a possibility that it could fit within either bucket easier, but I think that would lose some of its imperative value to both. I think that as an independent buy-in to claims potential, managing the running and the budget or the strategy around litigation that IMF brings, which, as I say, is not business as usual for those other organisations, I think it's a valuable outsourced service for both the CFO and the General Counsel. In the DuPont example, there was strong collaboration between finance, who saw the benefits, and their corporate counsel.
Okay, and Stuart, so there's a question then, isn't there, about what CFOs should be communicating to their colleagues about third-party dispute finance and what conversations they should be having with their in-house legal team, perhaps even with the board, with the directors, and with those who are responsible for navigating and managing the company's risk?
I think that's right. And I think that along with that risk overlay that is embedded within the CFO role, I think there needs to be, or recommended to be, a systematic method of identifying these potential claims. And they come from the operations and maybe marketing or other aspects within an organisation rather than necessarily from finance. So I think that needs to be filtered into that pot. I then think that the CFO and GC need to be able to consider third-party financing within that strategic recovery program and make it not a cost centre but a revenue centre. I think litigation financing allows that to occur once the organisation has that, oh, hang on, here is something that we could utilise or crystallise. It's not in our ordinary course of business, but we've identified it. Now, how do we do something about it?
I think you gave us the example earlier of the DuPont litigation, and by the sounds of it, that's not a typical case. But can you give us an example of a CFO or a company using third-party dispute finance and how that impacted on the risk profile or the budget?
Yeah, I've seen it occur within a funds management portfolio, and the ability to protect an investment without there being a need to erode or go through an investment decision about using a finite amount of capital. And as I say, that comes back to a resource allocation solution. Pfizer and GlaxoSmithKline have been most interested in the way that the DuPont recoveries program went and are pursuing or investigating similar type of things. Locally, we've recently assisted a major energy company in strategies to fund their infrastructure dispute with multinational parties. And globally, the range of products and things that IMF have looked at is very extensive, and I think would give comfort to any particular organisation that if there's something that's questionable that they can do something with, they should investigate it.
No, I think that's an excellent summary, Stuart. Thanks. And so if a CFO is interested in exploring third-party dispute finance and they want to get in touch with us, how do they go about it?
Simplest would be give us a call. Access our website, www.imf.com.au, and you'll see the track record, the transparency that is inherent upon us as a listed company and see the professionals in the organisation, get in touch with them individually. If anyone would like to call or email directly, I'll be more than happy to put them in touch with one of our expert investment managers. My email is smitchell, SMITCHELL, @imf.com.au, or my phone number is +612 8223 3567.
Fantastic. Look, thanks for joining us today, Stuart. That concludes today's episode. You can find a transcript of my interview with Stuart, as well as subscribe to future podcasts, blogs, and e-bulletins on Dispute Finance on our blog page at www.imf.com.au/newsroom/blog. And if you'd like more information on today's topic, please visit the Finance for Corporates page on our website under Practice Areas. Until next time, thanks for joining us and goodbye.